Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast.
Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. Today I have Angie Grandt on the show. She was on the show way back in the beginning, probably of season 2, when I first started talking about adoption. She is an adoptive parent. But before you turn off the show today, I really want to encourage you to listen. There are some adoptive parents out there that get it, and they are advocating for us adoptees, and they're trying to educate the world about adoption. So I hope that you stick with us today, and let me tell you a little bit more about Angie. Angie is an adoptive mom and mindset coach who is passionate about helping parents gain strategies to stop reacting to their child's behaviors and start responding with compassion. And she knows personally how very hard this can be. Recently, she's been digging deep into human design to better understand how to help parents be the best parenting version of themselves. Here is my interview with Angie Grandt. So we are welcoming Angie Grandt to the show today. Hey, Angie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time. You were on the show probably a little over a year ago. I was trying to remember. And I think you had just started your coaching business
Yeah.
at
Yep.
that
Oh,
time
yeah.
and came on.
Yeah.
So now I'm hearing that you've learned some new strategies and some new techniques that are working for you. And so I'm super excited to dive into that stuff because I'm super interested in that as well. And we'll get
Yeah.
into that later. But let's start off with you reminding us why you decided to adopt in the first place.
Yeah. So it started as a foster parent. So I have a biological daughter. She's 22, 23 now, or she'll be 23 this year. And when she was about 10, I don't know, I felt this strong pull to help other kids who needed somebody to love them while their family was working through things. So became a licensed foster parent. And then kind of one thing led to another. I met my son because I was a foster parent, but he wasn't in the foster care system. But we met our son, he was 5 at the time, and his mom really needed somebody to be his forever family. And so I was married at the time, and we thought, why not? So yeah, so we met our son, and yeah, it was love at first sight for sure.
So what struggles and behaviors did you start seeing after you adopted him?
um, yeah, that's a good question. So I'm very protective of my son. He's 18. And so I try not to talk about the specific behaviors, which I know for your listeners can be kind of challenging. But what I can say is that right away, I mean, within the first month, we were seeing some pretty substantial attachment and trauma related behaviors in our home. Um, uh, Not only with us, out in the community, with, as he interacted with other people, things related to sleep, related to food. I mean, it was across the board that we were having difficulties. And I often tell people that when I went into being a foster parent, at that point, I had already worked in special education, specifically working with the autism population for about 14 years. And I had so many tools in my bag to handle any kind of behavior, I thought.
Yeah, you would think,
Except
right?
for, yeah, except for the ones in my home, and I know a lot of parents say that when it's at home, it feels so different, even when you're really experienced. But it was really hard with my son, that attachment stuff, man. It's hard, and it really, as mom, like, I don't, probably a lot of your listeners feel this too, but as a parent, it's hard to not put up a wall around your heart as you're being hurt,
Yeah.
and I know he was a kid, but it was really hard for many, many years.
Yeah. Well, as an adoptee, I want to thank you for honoring like your son's privacy in that, and feeling like, but thank you for what you did share. And also, you can also share maybe what are some of the common things that you're seeing in the parents that you're coaching. What kind of things are they commonly dealing with raising adoptees?
Yeah, well, one commonality that I see, at least in the parents that come to me, I know that this isn't all adoptive parents, but it's a big chunk of them.
Mm-hmm.
But one commonality that I see is just, well, two things. One, parents feeling like they've tried everything and behaviors keep getting worse. And, in each of the families that I work with, behaviors are different. Some are more aggressive, some are more like shutting down, all kinds of different behaviors. But what seems so common is that the parents are like, I've tried literally everything. Like my child is in all this treatment and I'm accessing school services and nothing's working and behaviors are getting worse. So that's one thing that I see often. And the other thing that I saw it myself, but then across the board, I see it in the families that I work with, is that feeling like a victim in their own home, like the
Mm.
behaviors have taken over and they feel hopeless and don't know what to do. So those would be the two big things that I see across the
Yeah.
board in myself and others.
Yeah. I mean, because I know that adoptees feel like, when these behaviors come out, it's kind of like that warning light in your car. And so obviously something's going on, but I think a lot of times they don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
So frustrating for them and then frustrating for the parent too, to even know where to begin with that because nobody really knows and they're not educated on that this might be coming from, adoption trauma. That just sometimes isn't even on the radar either. So that's super
Yeah.
important to be educating people on. So thank you for what you're doing. Um, when you were in the foster system and through the adoption, was there any classes or did the agency give you anything to prepare to parent a foster or adoptive child?
Yeah. In the where we were licensed, it was, I don't know, it was like 16 weeks of training. It was pretty substantial in regards to
Okay.
understanding trauma and having a sense of, maybe some things that the kids had experienced and how that can impact their brain. I knew so much about trauma, more than I probably ever wanted to know. Um, and what I realized, I didn't know this then, but as I became a mindset coach and really understood how our brain works and our kids too, but what I came to realize is that I knew exactly what to do. My head, I could tell anybody like, my son needs this and this and this, but there was such a mismatch between what my gut was telling me to do and what my head was like listening to all the experts say to do. And there's so many examples that I can look back on where, there was a behavior happening in our home and my mind was, using all the information that the experts gave me, like, have, um, be more clear about expectations and structure and routine and all of these things. Even, and my gut was saying, like, just give him a hug. But my mind was like, no, 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 that's going to reinforce a behavior. And so I've like, just shush gut. The experts
Yeah.
say he needs rules and routines and whatnot. And so these little, I don't know, instincts would pop up that he needed something different from me, but everything that my brain was soaking in didn't match that. And now when I look back, I think like, man, how different our trajectory could have been earlier on.
Mm,
It's on such a great path now, and we can talk about that.
awesome.
But had I known then that I really should have trusted myself, right? Like, of course I needed to know about trauma. Of course I needed to know about attachment and what he experienced. But sometimes the experts don't know everything.
Yeah. And I think especially with adoptees, a lot of times you need to let go more than hold on tight because they feel so um, not in control of what has happened to them, but they need to feel some control. And a lot of that is acting out, and that's where they're
Yeah.
getting that control. Um, but yeah, just I think realizing that as well as an adoptive parent is big because I think you feel like, oh, you just want to love that child and, hug them and hold them and all that. And they may like really not want that in the moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, is there anything lacking or that needs improvement, like in the foster care system?
Um, I mean, if I if I were being totally honest, I would say that mindset coaching should be mandatory for adoptive and foster parents because I don't know, in our society we are so conditioned to think that the experts outside of us know. And we, as humans, go into any relationship, especially a parenting relationship, with expectations about how our kids should behave, and we don't know what to do when it doesn't match. And so then, as parents, we might dig in our heels, or we might, and create more rules or consequences, or that control thing you talked about can rub so many parents the wrong way. Like, no, 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 I need to make sure my child is in a safe environment. I need to make sure I have control of my home. The 5-year-old can't have control, right? But in all reality, you're 100% right. Our kids exert that control because they've lost control of so many important things in their life. And knowing how to do that and how to show up in with unconditional love, no matter how our kids behave, is so key to helping kids who've been through just the hardest thing.
Yeah.
So if I were to change the foster game, the adoption game, I would make mindset coaching mandatory.
What would you say are some of the things, if someone was thinking about adopting, what are some of the things that they should ask themselves before they do that?
Wow, that's a good question. I think as parents, one of the things that tends to, at least what I've heard from other parents and what I experienced, one of the hardest things is not feeling that reciprocal love sometimes, or a lot of the time. And are you okay with that? I think that's where I see so many parents have a hard time, is feeling like, but I'm doing so much for my child. I would say I have sacrificed all of my time for my son. I've sacrificed all of my energy, and I was just spent
Exhausted. Yeah.
and didn't get anything back in return from him, which can make it really hard, right? You're doing this incredibly hard job. And I now know I made it harder on myself than I needed to. Had I had a mindset coach beforehand, it would have been so much easier. I'm confident of that. But, being okay with going into a relationship that you might give 150% and you might not get anything back, and to be okay with, and
Yeah.
to not expect.
What I'm hearing is maybe not have hard set expectations on how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Kind of let it flow and see where it goes.
Yeah.
So you are a mindset coach. Who would you say is your target client, and who would benefit from working with you?
Well, all parents would benefit from working with me. My target audience tends to be, my outreach tends to be parents who are at the end of their rope, that they've tried everything and nothing's working, and they don't know what else to do. That's who I tend to attract. That's who I'm working with for the most part. I would love to work with parents before they get to that point, but I think oftentimes, I can speak as a newly adoptive mom, that I was like, I know exactly what to do. This is going to be amazing. So I wouldn't have known that I needed a coach. I would have thought like, oh no, I have such a positive outlook, and I'm just going to love on him so much that, it'll be okay. And yeah. So I would love to help with even pre-adoptive parents, because I know it would have a significant impact on the trajectory of their relationship and their child's sense of self. But right now I'm working with parents who are kind of in the thick of it.
Yeah. So when you came on the show last time, I don't think you were using human design in your practice. No. So tell us what human design is and how it's shifted parenting perspective and your coaching practice.
Yeah, so I have just started to scratch the surface of using it with my clients, and really just one so far. But so human design, man, to explain it eloquently, I've been learning about it for about a year. My coach has been getting certified, and I've been working with her for several years, but over the past year, she's been getting certified. So human design, it's kind of like, you think about like Myers-Briggs or other assessments that you can take. Well, those assessments are based on your current paradigms and the way that you see the world today. Based on all the experiences that you've had up to this point, you take a test. Human design is is based on astrology. It's based on the I Ching. It's based on ancient wisdom. And to get your human design, it sounds bizarre, but you actually just plug in your date and time of birth and the location. And from that, it creates your profile, or your body graph is what it's called. And all of us are so unique in how we're designed. But what's so powerful about human design is that it is who I am. And so as I'm understanding what human design is, but then really understanding me, a couple of things are happening. One is that nothing in there is really surprising. I mean, there's some things that maybe I wasn't super aware of, but it so aligns with who I am, where I've struggled in life, and where I really do have strengths. And so, for example, one of the strengths that I have that's clearly outlined in my human design is an intimacy strength. And what that means is that people really do open up to me, whether I'm, hanging out with friends or meeting with a new client, I have this energy about me that people really just open up to me, which can be really powerful as a coach because, people trust me. It's part of who I am. Then on the flip side, something that it's very clear in my design, and I kind of described this earlier, but I have what's called an open head or an undefined head. And what that means is that my mind is susceptible to outside influence more than somebody who has a defined head. Somebody who has a defined head, for example, it has kind of a fixed way of thinking, or somebody who's undefined or open is really receptive to outside experts, outside media, social media I'm really influenced by that. And so when I look back at parenting my son, I studied and attended conferences and had so many certifications. I soaked in all this information, but I was so easily influenced by that and have this disconnect between my head and my gut. Right. And so things like that are in my human design are unique to me. And so by knowing these things about me, right, like I said, nothing's new or magical. It is who I am. But when we're trying to, for example, like follow a book about how do I understand trauma? How do I implement this in my home? Well, that book might not be for somebody with my design. That book might be well written for somebody who, maybe has an open center in a different part of their body that is more receptive to it, right?
Yeah.
So by learning about our human design, we can really tap into our strengths and learn from our past experiences and use that. And I'm so much more confident now in who I am and how I can help other parents, and how I can continue to build such a strong relationship with my son, with my daughter, with my significant other, with people in my life, because I have such a greater understanding of who I am. So I don't know. I am going to be studying human design for the rest of my life, I think.
It sounds like it's almost like a soul blueprint or something.
Yeah, it 100% is.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So what does a typical session with you look like if someone comes in for the first time?
Yeah, so I offer a free consult. So before I work with anybody, and I was doing this long before I knew that I had that strength of intimacy, but I really need to make sure that it's a good energetic connection between me and the person that I'm working with, because the things we work on are really hard.
Yeah.
I help people totally shift the way that they are thinking and feeling and behaving with their kids. And it isn't just a new parenting strategy. It's about being a different version of yourself. And so I do a consult first. I go through this life audit where we talk about different areas of life. And so then if we decide that it's a good match and we proceed working together, then I work with my clients for 6 months. We meet every week. And so during those sessions, two things happen. One, I have curated a lesson plan of 8 lessons that help us go from feeling a victim in our home to really taking control of our thoughts and feelings in the way that we're showing up for our kids. So they build on each other. So we go through the lessons together, but then my clients go through them on their own. And then I also use key mindset coaching strategies. So they bring to me something that happened during the week, maybe an incident with their child. We work through it and I help them see it from a different angle so that they can shift the way that they're showing up the next time it happens. And now that I've worked with several more clients, it's just so powerful to see how parents who thought nothing's going to change how things are, parents often come to me saying, or implying at least, that things won't get better until their child's behavior changes. And I really help them see that by them changing how they're thinking and feeling and showing up, strangely enough, behaviors end up changing pretty much all the time anyways, because the parents are showing up differently. And it's not to say that they're to blame for the behaviors, but we coach, we learn. I do walk them through some specific strategies that they can try in their home to help shift how they're showing up. And then we meet again in a week.
So it kind of sounds like it's a balance with like practical, advice and things to do, but also how you're showing up energetic wise is huge as well, sounds like.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So for those that might be struggling, how can parents start to better understand how to be the best parent they can be?
That's a lovely question. I mean, to start to understand when I start working with my clients, I actually share with them on day one this article. It's by Bob Proctor. He's a well-known coach and teacher who helps people shift their mindset. He really was a pioneer in the mindset shifting world. And so he wrote this short article. It's only about 2.5 pages long, but it's called the Responsibility Article. And you can find it on Google. It's free, but it is powerful. And so I actually asked them to read it for every day for 30 days. And because every time we read it, we're a little bit different of a person. And I asked them to start really reflecting on their own life and where maybe they thought they were taking full responsibility, but that maybe they could look at it a little bit differently. And that is such a catalyst for change. So if you were going to do one thing to start shifting how you show up for your kids, start there.
And what would you say are some practical things that you could tell adoptive parents to do, or maybe some things not to do when dealing with their adopted child?
One piece of advice that I tend to share is two questions. One is for you, one is about your child, I guess. So when you are feeling a negative feeling, like feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, angry, resentful, whatever that feeling on the negative end of the spectrum is, when you have that feeling pop up, ask yourself, what am I making it mean? Right? If you're frustrated because, I don't know, somebody cut you off in traffic, well, what are you making it mean that they cut you off? Right? Because that frustration is a direct response of something, an expectation that you have for how things should be. It's the same with our kids. If you are just exhausted and spent, well, what are you making their behaviors mean about what's happening in your home? So that can be a really powerful mindset shifting question. And then another one, my last question, is when your child is feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, acting out, ask yourself, what does my child need from me right now? Because oftentimes what we do isn't what they need. They don't need a lecture. They don't need you to tell them that they made another mistake. They don't need you to shame them for hurting the dog or hurting somebody's feelings. They probably need to feel safe and loved. Because when our kids have been through trauma, that's what fuels so much of the behavior. So next time your child is acting out, ask, what does my child need from me right now?
Yeah. Yeah. What would you do differently as an adoptive mom if you could do it all over again?
Hire a mindset coach before I became a foster parent.
Yeah. And what benefits do you think people would have in doing that?
Oh my goodness, so many. It it will help you to not get stuck in frustration, overwhelm. Like I tell my clients, of course, feel frustrated or sad or mad, but let's use our tools to not stay there. Because as parents, when behaviors are happening every day, every moment, it feels like we stay there and then we become this victim, kind of stuck in this hamster wheel of behaviors. And so I teach my clients, yeah, like feel frustrated. That's cool. Have your feelings. And then let's get rid of it and move on to the feeling you want to be having about your child. And so then I help them with how to do that. So it helps you not get stuck in frustration. And honestly, like working with a mindset coach, I just feel so much more confident, happy. I have so much control over my life, and I thought I did before, but I really didn't. I was so um, my feelings were so victim to whatever was happening around me,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not now, or at least they are for a moment, and then I take a step back, like, okay, yep, thanks for reminding me that that feels frustrating, but I'm going to do something about it now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so empowering, so
Right.
empowering.
How is it going with your son? If you want to share whatever you feel comfortable with sharing.
Yeah, it's going really well. We didn't really hardly talk for a couple of years, other than like a text message every month or two, which was really sad.
Mhm.
But I knew I needed to give him space. Things had gotten really, really hard in our home and scary, and so he chose to live with his dad, my ex-husband. And that space was good. And it was during that time that I hired a mindset coach and really worked on me. And so now I just show up for him, and we're building a relationship. He seeks advice from me, which he looks forward to spending time with me, and vice versa. I look forward to spending time with him, which wasn't the case before. I before I just got the feeling like he just wished he had never been in our family. And
Mm-hmm.
it feels so different now. But he didn't have to do anything. I did. I changed the way that I was looking at our relationship and the way that I'm showing up. It had When things were so rough, even like thinking about him, thinking about behaviors, thinking about having to go pick him up at his dad's, I would have an immediate physiological response in my body
Mm-hmm.
that like my gut twisted in a knot, and my heart would get racing, like I was ready to, I don't know, fight, flight, or freeze, whatever my
Mm-hmm.
body was going to choose to do, just by being with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And now I look forward so much to our dinners together and look forward to our conversations. It is really lovely, and it's not perfect, um, but I'm intentionally having a good relationship with him and creating that because it matters to me and hopefully to him.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is more of a therapist role or something that you do, but when you find out someone's thinking about adopting, do you ever ask the reasons why? Because if it's infertility or some of those type of issues, a lot of times those things need to be worked through first because, slapping a Band-Aid on it by adopting a child, you still got a lot of things in there that you probably need to process. Do you deal with that at all? Do you ask why and kind of work through that at all?
Well, I don't really encounter families when they're in that pre-adoptive phase. And so, but I do think that that would be something so important to work through. I've been following a lot more adoptees on Instagram and coaches and whatnot, just really trying to understand better what adoptees go through. And um, something that I see pop up a lot is adoptees saying that I wish that my parents hadn't adopted me as a way to work through their own trauma.
Yeah.
And honestly, I see it happen a lot with adoptive parents that they think, well, I've been through rough things, so I can help others. But if they haven't really worked through their own trauma, it can become really hard when you're then raising a child who can have just unsettling behaviors sometimes.
Yeah. I
Can be
just
really
wonder
hard.
if like some of the, even after, they come to you and they've had a child for a while and are having problems. Um, I think it might be helpful to ask that question still, because
Yeah,
what if they didn't even think that part of what is happening energetically with their child is really rooted in their why they even
yeah,
got the child in the first place, um,
yeah,
and how they're
yeah.
behaving towards that child. Um, so in closing, what would you want struggling adoptive parents to know?
Well, I would definitely want them to know that there really is hope, and it's probably not more experts giving you another parenting strategy. I I I feel so confident that if if you're struggling with behaviors, that working with a coach can really shift that around for you. But it can't just be any coach. I know I've heard some other I've heard parents talk about, well, the county gave me a coach, but it was just somebody giving me parenting strategies, not
Mm-hmm.
helping me to show
Yeah,
up differently. So it does matter the kind of coach.
yeah,
And I really feel strongly that it should be on somebody who understands what you're going through, because because it isn't easy when your emotions are wrapped up in what you're trying to work through. It isn't
yeah.
easy. So I would, I hope that your listeners leave this conversation and all of your episodes, but leave feeling like there is hope. And it might take just doing things a little bit differently than you've done them before. Um, if anybody wants to chat about human design and have like walk through it, I would love to do that with you. I think, Melissa, you're going to put my booking link in there, but
Yes.
if that's something that you want to explore a little bit more to show how to show up, to help see how you can show up as you are designed to for your kiddos, I'd love to work through that with you.
And where can we find you? And you have started a podcast and you've got your coaching and all that stuff. So, are you on social media, websites, all that stuff? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I did just launch a podcast. I think I'm 2 weeks in now, so I only have a couple of episodes, but it's called Sometimes Love Isn't Enough, the Parenting Through Challenges podcast. I was originally going to make it an adoption only podcast, but I think that there's so many parents, foster parents or parents who, have gone through all kinds of different things that I think the content can be really helpful for. But this, like we've talked about today, being an adoptive mom is really what drives me to help other parents, because it's such a unique, it can be such a unique struggle. So Sometimes Love Isn't Enough is my podcast. And then pretty much everywhere, my company name is Connected Parents with Angie. So that's my Instagram. I have a Facebook page. They're all Connected Parents with Angie. And that's my website too, connectedparentswithangie.com. And like I mentioned earlier, I do offer a free consult. So if you want to explore whether or not coaching is the right next step for your family, I'd love to do that.
Great. I just, as an adoptee, want to thank you for what you're doing, because by coaching adoptive parents, you're helping that adoptee be able to, work through their traumas and things too. So I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, Angie. I'm just so thankful and grateful for adoptive parents like Angie, who really get it and care about helping the adoptees and their experience and their trauma. I love that it's practical advice that she gives, as well as showing up energy wise. How are you showing up with your energy is huge with adoptees, because we are so hypersensitive. We can tell how you're showing up, not just by your words, but by your actions and how your energy feels to us. At least that is the case for me. Angie does free discovery calls. So if you are struggling as a parent, she doesn't just do adoptive parents, but that definitely is her specialty and her passion is adoptive parents. But what if you got to lose? Call and see if she is a fit for you as a parenting coach. As always, I am doing somatic therapy, so somatichealingjourneys.com if you are interested in that, learning more about me and my practice there. You can email me at mindyourownkarma@gmail.com if you want to be a guest on the podcast. I would love to have you on. I would love to have your story help educate the world about adoption. As always, take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember, mind your own karma.